Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Hey, today we have with us Mark Singer, who is the president of Safe Harbor Retirement Planning and the author of Don't Outlive Your Money in Retirement, 7 Key Steps. Mark, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mike. I'm glad to be here.
Hey, so give us a little bit of background on yourself, because I know you don't just wake up one day and go, I'm a plumber today and tomorrow I'm going to write a book about retirement. So I know you've got a vast background in retirement type planning. So give us a little bit of background there, and then what led you into writing this book specifically?
So it's interesting. Many years ago, when I was in a completely different industry and I was in my 20s, I actually hired a financial planner. I didn't have any money at the time. I just wanted to know what I didn't know, in essence.
Yeah.
What were the questions I needed to ask in order to put me on track? And it was the best investment I ever made into myself. And I was at a crossroads a couple years later and realized, hey, maybe this is an industry I actually want to go into because I know how much he benefited me. So I've spent 32 years in this business, and my real passion, my real love is educating people, is to teach them, again, what they may not know that they should and how to put themselves on track, because our motto really is, you've worked hard for it, retirement, and we want you to truly enjoy it. And my most recent book, to answer your second question, which is my 4th book, and the funny part about that is after writing the first one, I said I would never do this again. And now I'm on the 4th one. But what really prompted me here was the whole pandemic and the COVID situation. And how it impacted us at so many different levels and brought home a completely different perspective, particularly now as we're home with our spouse. And for many of us, that's what retirement is going to look like, right?
Yeah.
We no longer have the office to go to or work to go to. And, oh my gosh, is this what retirement is going to look like? So I wrote the book, believe it or not, in 2 weeks.
Nice.
But it took me 32 years to write the book. If you understand
you're the overnight success.
Right, exactly.
It took you 30 years to be that overnight success.
Right,
so you wrote it in 2 weeks, but boy, you didn't have those thoughts congealed in your mind until decades of experience.
Right. So I've really enjoyed it. We've gotten great feedback from it. So it really is a love of mine.
I really love that correlation between COVID, because you hear about the stories, wow, when I retired, or you hear about this couple that goes, wow, Bill's now home all the time, go get a job, and the kids are out of the house. Now we have to talk to each other. So it's really an interesting kind of like a prequel, being, in quarantine or tighter quarters, or you can't go out as much as you can with COVID. So that kind of is an interesting kind of lead into, let's think about retirement. So here's a question that comes to my mind when you're describing that. And I know that you either get this question out or you deal with it a lot. Hey, at what age should we start planning for retirement? Because you hired a financial planner before you had really money. Well, when should someone start making some real, actual, solid decisions for retirement? Because I think that's an easy thing to put off. Oh, I'm only 30. That retirement's a billion years from now. Oh, I'm only 50. I can keep on going. When do you have people that you work with start thinking and making some solid plans?
So I'll answer the question directly. We typically work with folks who are really in their mid-50s and up, because that's when, for the most part, most people are starting to seriously consider what retirement might be, what they need to do, how they need to invest, etc. Now, that's not really the answer to your question, however. And, AARP did a study, I believe it was last year, and they asked people who were approaching the typical retirement age, call it 65 through 67, what percentage of them were actually going to retire at that time. And the vast majority of folks were deferring their retirement. And the number one answer for why they were deferring it was that they didn't have enough money. Yeah. And so the reality is, even though we get in touch with people who are in their mid-50s when they start to do serious planning, you really can't start the planning for retirement at 55. You have to have set up some foundation. Yeah. You have to have invested long before that. And, the whole story of compounding interest, the earlier you invest, the more you'll have later, you really need to have been on a journey for many years in order to then open up the conversation about seriously considering. And if you take to heart the AARP study and realize that most people who are facing retirement don't have the money, then the earlier you start, the better off you will be.
Yeah, and that sounds so easy to say. And the earlier you start, and like, how about the tables you see with compound interest? Hey, if you invest this in your 401k at age 20, by age 65, look at how much you have. But if you wait just 5 years, look at how much less. So you get that, but it sounds so much easier than it is. And so what I would say. One book I remember reading years ago by David Bach called The Automatic Millionaire, and I remember you always attribute a learning point from where you learned it from, and I remember him going, don't leave it up to yourself. Set up the automatic, deduction from your paycheck, so you at least start that process. So, my kids are almost all, like to the point of, let me get a career job, and I've already started telling them, make sure the minute you are able to get into some type of retirement plan, set it up automatically. So what do you say to people that go, yeah, I know I should be making some real plans, but it just doesn't seem real to me right now. It doesn't seem tangible, because I know you should start making some plans in the 50s, but even before then, you need to have some momentum.
It's really difficult, Mike, and it's one of the really. So I think our industry has, for the most part, done a lousy job of educating people. Okay, and I'll position that in two different ways. First, we have not provided the necessary financial awareness or financial literacy that people need in order to understand and to break down the planning for their financial affairs so they're not afraid. Okay? We've got the short term, the medium term, and the long term stuff, and we tend to, particularly when we were in our 20s, 30s, and 40s, and I tell this to my daughter all the time, when you're in your 20s, you're going to struggle. When you're in your 30s, you're going to struggle more. When you're in your 40s, you're going to struggle even more, and it's not until you're in your 50s that you may find some freedom. And you really need to understand how to take a hold of all of the responsibilities you have and prioritize what your needs are. And the number one concern that people have long-term financially is, how do I set myself up for a successful outcome in retirement? But if we can't show them how to overcome the number one short-term need, which is managing their cash flow, then if we can't help them free up the cash flow to make those automatic deductions into their 401ks or their IRAs, then they're not going to set themselves up for a successful retirement.
And I'll even interject one step to take it one step further, which is cash flow is wonderful. But if you are not disciplined with the right decisions to use your money, your cash flow with, because here's what I will tell you. I spent over a decade in the mortgage banking industry, and I can't tell you how many times I would have a couple in their 60s coming in with a first mortgage, a second mortgage, a car loan, 25, 35, 40,000 on credit card debt. And I'm going, you should be winding down with no debt, and you've got all of this. So that couple that I just described there, they may have wonderful cash flow, but they've got debt and they don't have anything going into liquidity. So I think that there's like the analogy of the bucket. You might have cash flow money going into the bucket, but you got some holes where it's flowing right back out.
Yes. Yeah. And again, it all begs the whole question of planning, right? And so one of the questions that people, as they go to transition into retirement, ask, and the number one issue that people have when they do retire is, will I outlive my money? Because we're living longer, which begs the question, am I taking the right amount of risk with my portfolio? And one of the questions I pose in the book is, do you think it's riskier to take on too much risk or too little risk with your money? And we don't often think of it in that way. And again, I think our industry's done a lousy job of educating, because what happens when you go into retirement, the amount of risk you take has to be in accord with how much cash flow you need. And the way you manage your money while you're working, which is what we call in the industry the accumulation stage, where we're looking to grow enough money to have a nest egg to retire, it's okay to take on more risk because you have a lot of time to overcome the errors that you may make in your investing. But when you go to retire, you go into the distribution phase where we're looking to get our income. And there is where the whole change in planning comes about. Because if your listeners are dealing with a financial planner right now and they're not retired, probably the number one conversation is, how did I do with my money last year? Did I do better or worse than the benchmark, the S&P, the Dow, or whatever? But when you go into retirement, believe it or not, the whole conversation about money management drops from being the most important conversation and the only conversation to being like number 4, 5, or 6, because the planning first will help you to identify what cash flow you need in retirement, and then from that need, you will back into how much risk do I need to take in order to generate the income that I need. We call that the personalized investment benchmark. You're no longer looking to outperform the S&P or the Dow or whatever. You're looking to get the return that you need in order to generate the income you desire to pursue your retirement goals. And it's a very different process. So the question of whether you're taking on too much or too little risk gets thrown out the door. You need to take the right amount of risk for your needs.
Yeah, and guess what else? Risk is not a dirty word. Calculated risk is what you need to be thinking about, which is what you're describing, right? You need to take that calculated risk, because if you don't want risk at all whatsoever, then go to the bank and open up a lockbox and start stuffing cash in there. Then there's no risk at all. Well, guess what? Maybe there is risk. The bank might burn down. Who knows? But I know you talk about imagining what retirement will look like in your book. Hey, where do you want to live? And do you want to volunteer? And do you even want to work part-time? And I think that ties in so well with what Stephen Covey taught, begin with the end in mind. So if you know that here's what your retirement should look like, what your dream retirement, well, I want to wake up without an alarm clock. I want to this, that, and the other. Well, then what's the step right before that? And then what's the step before that one? So talk a little bit about that, imagining, envisioning what retirement would look like for you in a perfect world, and then how you can help backstep that into making it a reality.
So that's really at the essence of, if you will, the 32 years of conversations I've had with my clients. Because if we have an hour meeting with a client, we probably spend 3 minutes on money management and 57 minutes on life, right?
Yeah.
What do you need to do, particularly if you haven't retired yet? And the most important thing that you must do at least a couple of years before retirement is visualize what it is you're going to do. My best friend just sold his practice out in Scottsdale. And it took him 3 years to transition out. And now that he's retired, he calls me up every day and says, all right, it's 10 o'clock, just had breakfast. Do you have any suggestions for what I'm going to do the rest of the day? He has no kids. He loves his 2 Corvettes. He shows them in car shows, doesn't play golf, doesn't play tennis, works out, but really doesn't have anything else to fill his life. And outside of running out of money, the number one fear that I hear from my clients who in essence have enough money to retire successfully in the traditional definition, their number one fear is, what do I do with the rest of my life? Now, we talked earlier about, this whole COVID situation and being home, and one of the funniest stories I have is I was interviewing a client of mine, a couple, for the book, and they were both about to retire. They're actually in their 70s. They're municipal employees, and they're both about to retire the same year. And I said to him, so what keeps you up at night? He says, I like to play golf, but I can only play 3 days a week. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And I turned to her and I said, so what keeps you up at night? She says, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with him here in the house. So you really need to, and I believe when we say you worked hard for it, we really want you to enjoy it. Once you set in place the financial planning, that's one thing. Okay, the numbers are just part of the conversation. Can I pursue my financial goals? But what's so much more about rewarding with regards to your retirement is everything else and all the things that fill in the blanks. Why am I getting up in the morning? Where am I going? Where am I getting my rewards? Am I traveling? Am I taking care of the grandkids? Am I volunteering? Am I going back to work because I want to or because I need to? There's so many different things and hobbies and passions that you need to understand and have a conversation with your partner before you retire so you can understand what the boundaries are, what the roles are, how you're going to fill your life, and truly, truly, truly get the joy of the journey of retirement once you've entered into that stage.
I think that's just such a perfect point to consider because I think many people in their mind, they look at retirement as this dot on the timeline. Okay, if I can only get to here and then I'm retired, yay. And in reality, the old let me retire and go fishing or play golf or do these normal, that's going to be fun for about a week and a half for many people. Now, I will say I've got an aunt and an uncle, 2 aunts and uncles that the uncles, they worked in like the unions and asbestos removal and construction. And they just, when they retired, they went to Florida and they sit. And they play golf and they sit. And they're happy with that, and that's wonderful. Me, if I'm on vacation for more than a week, I'm getting antsy, and I'm like, I got to work on a project. So I think that's a big thing you need to think about is in retirement, do you still want to work because you need to? Well, we need to do some planning to prevent that because we don't want that pressure. But if you do some work, maybe some helping, consulting, something, because you want to, now you're bringing some fulfillment to yourself. You're seeing yourself giving back to maybe an industry that you know inside and out. Maybe you're helping, the next generation, whatever the case is, but you're staying busy and you're staying focused rather than your friend that goes, wow, I showed my Corvettes and I don't like to play golf, so now what do I do? Well, find something to do to give back and to serve. And I think that now can open up the worlds of opportunity for people to fill their time with fulfillment, for the fulfillment bucket.
So let me share with you the foreword of my first book. And it was a story of a client of mine. She was now in her late 50s. She had gotten to the point where she could now maximize her pension from the insurance company she had worked with for almost 40 years. So you do the math. Wow. It was the only job she ever had. We did the planning, went through the whole 7-step process that we do with all of our clients, and realized that, in essence, the answer to the question was, can I retire today? Yes, she could. Okay, super. So we've done the planning. She comes back a month later after we said, okay, put your paperwork in, and she comes back into my office. And she starts to cry. Well, that wasn't a reaction I was waiting for. Mm-hmm. We had already done this was supposed to be good news. You could now retire. And she says, listen, Mark, here's the deal. This is my second home. I know in the morning what I need to do, where I'm going to go. I'm a part of a community. Work is so much more than just the paycheck. It's a place where I'm respected. I contribute. I have colleagues. Once I then retire, I give all of that up. I don't know whether or not I can retire. So my role is as much financial planner as it is, if you will, psychologist, where we really have to help people to understand what do you need to do for the rest of your life to fill that void that you may not even realize that you're losing because you just took it for granted for all these years.
I think that's such a huge point. And have you ever read that book, The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss?
I have not.
It's a really interesting book, really wonderful, and one of the things I remember from it, I think it's totally unrealistic. No one can actually work 4 hours a week and be productive, but the concept is interesting, and it's like probably an attention grabbing. But one of the points he makes is don't wait till retirement to retire and do the things you want to do. You know what? Yes. Structure your life and your business so that you can take these mini sabbaticals, mini retirements, and take 3 months off every year. Take 3 months off, and if you own a business, your business runs like a top. If now you couldn't do this working for a job or government, but if you have that in place, now all of a sudden you are planning ahead and you've got that margin in your life. And I think that now becomes something where you're going, wow, what would it be like in my retirement years if I was 3 months of doing nothing because I don't need to? And I think that's such an interesting mindset. And I love that you coach people to think about that and what will happen when. And if that thought scares you, if you're visioning your retirement and that thought kind of confuses or scares you, guess when the best time to deal with it is? Right now. And make some of those plans. Make money plans and make some retirement plans, but make some of those life plans because it's a real thing. And then, of course, the stats when people have that fulfillment and contribution and then they retire and they do nothing. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, they now go into a depression because they don't have that. So that's a whole other side of things. So I love that approach that you take there. So let's wrap up with this, Mark. I really appreciate your perspectives and insights. What's the best way that people can reach out, connect with you, learn more about what you do, and pick up a copy of your new book?
Appreciate the opportunity, and I can share with you, and I've spoken nationally for years on the topic of financial education and financial literacy, and one of the things I've learned as a speaker is that to provide education is one thing, but I really want to compel people to action. And towards that end, what I want to offer to your listeners is the quiz that we've developed from our new book, Don't Outlive Your Money in Retirement. We developed a quiz to help you to understand exactly which stage of retirement preparation you are in, whether you're about to retire or just recently retired. And if you go about and fill out that quiz, we will also, oh, by the way, give you a couple of bonuses, which will include the first chapter of the book and a couple of the worksheets that we have in the book. So you'll end up being a little bit ahead of the people who haven't gone down this road before. So if you really are interested in finding out what stage of retirement planning you're in or where you are with your retirement, you can go online to Retire Now Quiz. RetireNowQuiz.com, and once you fill that out, we'll give you a couple of bonuses for doing so, because I really believe in trying to give you as much in the way of information, value, and tools as is necessary so you can be ahead of the curve and really truly enjoy the retirement journey.
Excellent. Well, Mark, thank you so much for coming on today. It was great talking with you, and I wish you all the great success in your brand new book.
Mike, I really appreciate it, and I hope that your listeners came away with at least one nugget out of this.
Yes, excellent. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.